Welcome to Trailblazers Impact Podcast with inspiring stories of women. I'm Nan McKay, and Dee Dee Strum, my co-host, and I interview ordinary women who have lived extraordinary lives. The women we interview share their inspirational secrets and provide hope and guidance to women of all ages in similar circumstances. Trailblazers Impact chronicles struggles, successes, and the impact of lessons learned from seasoned professionals who have blazed a trail for others to follow. Trailblazers Impact Podcast is featured in the top 20 Trailblazers Trendsetters podcasts by FeedSpot and as one of the top 28 podcasts for women in their 20s by Pretty Progressive. Our website is trailblazersimpact.com, and you can contact us at hello@trailblazersimpact.com. Please follow us on our website and read our blogs while we share. I would like to introduce you today to Betsy Muller. Betsy has an expertise in using human energy for peak performance. Now, what in the world does that mean? Well, she's a small number of master trainers of emotional freedom techniques. And she's also an author of 2 books. So let's find out about this. Tell us a little more about what a master trainer of emotional freedom technique would be.
Okay. So to back up a little bit, I've always been passionate about health, self-care, and moving my body. You could call that kinesthetic, because that's how I really experience the world, is through feelings and sensations. So I started this business because I had an experience at a meeting in Switzerland where someone showed me emotional freedom techniques, which is acupressure for emotions. It's actually tapping on these points on the body that interrupts the human stress response. And it blew me away. That was 2001 when I first learned it. And having been somebody who had been in the corporate world, who was managing a group medical practice at the time, I was so intrigued. And I knew all these stressed out people in the world, they needed to know this. At the time, there was no research behind it. So I was kind of in a conundrum because I was a science person. I actually have a chemistry degree and an MBA, and I had always been really, really logical, left brain person. And suddenly this new way of being in the world had emerged for me. But it made perfect sense because I like natural things. I like to find solutions that you don't have to be dependent on another person. So emotional freedom techniques, tapping is pretty easy. You can teach a child to do it. You can teach an adult and even an older person with brain dementia to do these processes to improve their lives and to help them have better brain function, better emotional connection to the world. So that's important.
It is important. Do you talk about that in your sessions that you do?
Absolutely.
How about your book? Is that about that too?
So my book, both of the books talk about how to do emotional freedom techniques on a very basic level. I'm a speaker, so I go out and do introduction programs to people in all fields because everybody could benefit by knowing how to manage their emotions naturally in the moment, very quickly. And then I do women's retreats, a monthly networking group. So there's many ways. I love group experiences and live experiences, but I also do internet stuff. So my clients can work with me by Zoom if they're the right kind of client. And again, I screen everybody. So they call me for a consult first. I'm also a trainer. So I have students that are learning to be certified practitioners of emotional freedom techniques. So oftentimes I can refer some of the calls that I get to the students, and everybody benefits because the student learns and the client usually gets free or reduced rate. Okay?
So if someone wanted to get in touch with you, would they go to your website?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And give us the website address.
So it's kind of long. It's create and connect brilliantly.com. And they could also go to betsymuller.com and it'll take them there. So that might be easier.
Can you give us a couple of tips? Or is it just too big a subject?
Oh, I love tips. Okay. So, first tip for your energy is drink water, because your energy will be better managed if you have that lubricant that, it paves the way for energy to move inside of you. The other thing is to get up and move, because you are a two-sided being. You're a left-right being. And if you're sedentary, especially people with depression, maybe low mood, their energy might not be crossing over the midline. And so there are exercises in both of my books that talk about how you can get that energy to cross. It's taking one hand, your right hand, and touching your left knee, your left hand and touching your right knee, and going back and forth in a little marching pattern. And that will help that happen. So I have a routine I do every morning. My roommate here, we're together at a meeting here, and my roommate knows I do these strange things every morning.
And do you get her to do it too?
Yes, I do. And my husband, who recovered from a brain injury, part of his recovery was doing some of these exercises every morning with me. And he didn't really know the sequence at first, so it was good to help him remember, get his brain coming back. Now we do them every day before he goes to work, and then we kiss and he goes to work. And so it's a connector too. It's a healthy way to be your very best, and it doesn't take very long.
Now, how did he have a brain injury?
Okay, so my book, The Comeback, which has just been out a very short time, is the story of what happened on June 10th, 2017. We were on vacation celebrating that his lacrosse season was over, and I was finally walking after a major surgery on my foot and ankle. And so we're in this lovely little lakefront town on Lake Michigan at a bed and breakfast, and he got up one morning and said, I think I'm going to go for a run. I'll be back. I'll meet you at breakfast. And I waited and waited at breakfast, and he never showed up. And then I got worried, and I called 911, and police cars roared in, and it didn't get any better after that. And so he had a cardiac arrest out there, and somebody saw him, gave him CPR, thank God. And then an officer came with an AED, automatic defibrillator, and shocked him a few times, and they got a pulse. So he was taken to a hospital. Something for everyone to understand about CPR is that even with CPR, you only have about 6 minutes to keep enough oxygen to the brain to keep the brain functioning. And George probably went a little longer than 6 minutes, maybe 7 or 8 minutes. They're not really sure. And so his brain shut down. What they do, well, it was very grim when I got to the hospital. And I was told that he had no activity in his eyes, which was not a good sign. But what they do is they cool them off, and they put them in an induced coma. And you wait. And it didn't get better. It got worse, because he had seizures then, and we transferred. And so anyway, it was grim, but I knew he would be okay.
So how long was he in that coma?
He was in the coma almost 3 weeks.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, and we were out of town, so I was out of town, but people stepped up. One of the things I say about energy, we talk about energy in my work. Energy is that invisible stuff called love. And in this case, I'm an expert at that too. I loved him back, I'm pretty sure. And a lot of people helped me, because I asked people to help me love him back, bring him back, pray for him.
So was he still in the hospital all that time and you had to leave?
No, so I stayed with him in Michigan. We changed hospitals. He got transported to the other hospital. And eventually when he came out of the coma, within a day, the social worker, thank God for social workers, helped arrange for us to transfer back to Cleveland by ambulance. We went immediately into rehab hospital, which again was a blessing, because most places would want him hospitalized. But in the case of brain injury, what everybody listening to this needs to know is the sooner you get somebody into rehabilitation, speech, occupational and physical therapy, the more rapid the recovery can be. So anybody out there, be an advocate for that person with the brain injury and do everything in your power to quickly get them into rehabilitation. So he went from laying down in a coma. The next day, he was up on his feet, walking with a physical therapist with assistance. He was doing occupational therapy, not very well, and he was exhausted. Brain injuries are exhausting for these patients. Same goes for strokes, too. Anybody who knows someone with a stroke will know how tired they are. Yeah.
And could he speak at that point?
No, for a few days, he eventually, his first word, they asked him what his name was. A name is a very powerful energy, too. And he replied, George, as clear as a bell. After being intubated for so long, sometimes they don't have a voice just because it's so irritated. So that was a miracle, too. I think within 2 days of that, he told me he loved me. So he didn't know a lot of stuff, but he knew enough of the important stuff.
And how long did it take to really go back through rehab and getting back to a point where he felt comfortable that he was okay?
So, it was gradual. So I wrote every day. So the book kind of takes you through each day. And there isn't much change day to day, but each week you could see things had changed. So the incident happened on June 10th. And I'm happy to report that by Labor Day, he was released from an inpatient place to come home. But he did rehabilitation, continued outpatient at home for another 2 months after that. And by Christmas, he got his driver's license back and proceeded to leave in the car immediately before I could stop him. And by January, he resumed full responsibility for coaching his lacrosse team. And now, I mean, you wouldn't detect any deficiencies at all with him.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Were you involved in emotional intelligence prior to that?
Yes, very much. I had never experienced trauma myself in such a big way. I had worked with trauma victims, people that had horrific things, because this emotional freedom techniques works very well for PTSD, horrible childhood memories, sexual violence, all sorts of things like that. I personally had not needed to work on those issues, but when you're involved with a medical trauma and you see your husband and he's blue and he's bleeding, and I mean, that ER scene for me was probably one of the worst things that I'd ever been through, because they took me to see him, and it was not pleasant. Nobody even prepared me for that. And so I used the process on myself to clear that so I could be the caregiver and the advocate I needed to be for his care. And it was amazing to me how well it worked. I slept every night solidly. I ate healthy. I was happy, and I wrote every day. I mean, I stuck to my routines and took care of myself,
Would this be helpful for someone who has been through an abusive situation?
Oh, yes. Yes. I mean, anybody who's had a breakup, a marriage dissolve. It doesn't have to be physical abuse. It can be anything that impacts your confidence. I work with athletes sometimes, and a difficult defeat, an injury, a job loss, all those things set us back. I mean, I picked this title, The Comeback, because so many of us are always recovering from something.
It seems like it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I think of people in like shelters for battered persons,
Yeah.
like prison systems.
Or human trafficking.
Or human
all
trafficking.
These things.
Yeah.
And the Me Too movement right now, what I find is women, as they get to this menopause and above age, if they have not faced those terrible things that happened when they were younger, they kind of surface to disrupt their peace. And maybe it's, menopause symptoms. Maybe it's just not being able to sleep. And I truly believe that if you can go back and face it with a process that works very well and very quickly, you can see it in a new way, and you can gain wisdom from it and move on finally. And so it doesn't matter how long it's been. My experience is, if people are willing to face it and they work with someone that has the confidence and the ability to use this technique with them, I wouldn't recommend doing it alone. Those kind of things need a practitioner. And that's the kind of practitioner I train. And they don't have to necessarily be licensed, but we got to be careful who we work with. Mental illness is a serious thing, but a lot of us are pretty resilient, but we've had a bad experience somewhere, and we can help them.
That's amazing.
Mhm.
How did you get to Switzerland to start all this?
That's a coincidence of sorts too. So I was running a group medical practice for a physician who was she was doing traditional osteopathic medicine, and also she had acupuncture and some other things, and she had a pretty robust speaking business. And as her general manager of everything, I would pitch her to places to be a speaker. And there was this meeting in Switzerland that sounded fabulous just because it was Switzerland. So I got her accepted for that, and I blurted out one day. I said, well, I should go with you too. And she goes, yes, you should. You set it up. I'm like, oh, I can't go to that. So I mentioned it in passing to my husband, and he said, well, you really should go. And my father overheard because we were having dinner. And he said, well, I have all these airline points, and they're going to expire. Why don't you go? And you could go first class. And so Mrs. Muller went to Switzerland first class. And I didn't even know what the meeting was about. I just wanted to go to Switzerland. And so I ended up on the mountaintop at a place called Hotel Furigen over Lake Lucerne that has swans in it. If you've ever been to Lake Lucerne, the most gorgeous place on the planet. Mm-hmm. And then I meet all these people that feel like I've known them forever. And I go to a seminar, and they're doing this tapping stuff. And it was like I was hit by a bolt of lightning. Like, this is what you're supposed to do. Oh, no, it's not. I have to go run a medical practice. So I waited 4 years. It took me 4 years to finally realize that instead of being an administrator, I really was a healer. I was a practitioner who could take everything she learned in the past. Because I also ran a small business, believe it or not, somebody else's small business. But I learned and had the confidence to break away to do a small business myself. Yeah.
What skills do you think are necessary to start a business?
Oh, I think that is the courage thing, because you're going to have your doubts. I think you need to be a little analytical or smart enough to hire an analytical person. So to have a good accountant, or at least be decent enough at QuickBooks to keep track. I think you need to be organized enough to have goals, ambition, like where do you want to be 5 years from now, or even the end of this year. I remember putting together a business plan. Business plans are a good thing. Look up business plan on Google, and there's all sorts of tools to help you. And, a mission statement. Know if you have competition. And you really won't find out till you get into it, right? But at the end of the day, everybody's going to do a unique business. I don't really think competition is that big of a deal if you're doing the right thing for your clients, and you know who your clients are going to be. Just don't keep your head in the sand. And boy, join an organization like NABO so that you're with collaborative business owners to give you some advice, or hire a coach. I would say, I coach other business owners from time to time, and this emotional freedom techniques process helps them get over the fear, maybe a previous thing that didn't work out, to help them be confident about giving it a try.
What do you think is the biggest challenge in running a business?
Discipline, self-discipline. I think I've been successful because I can be self-directed. I think, someone has to be self-motivated. You have to have a why. You have to get up in the morning and be excited about it and do things, and not let setbacks stop you. They can slow you down. Maybe that's the time to go out for a run, or take the dog for a walk and come back, or take a vacation. But yeah, you have to pick yourself up and say, okay, plan B, right?
Thinking about your personal life, other than your husband's experience, what are some of the biggest challenges you've faced?
Well, one of the things, before things happened with him, my ankle and foot fell apart. And I had to make a decision to have a surgery that would require me to be on my back with my foot up for about 4 months with no with no weight on my foot. And the worst part about it is he would have to take care of me, and he can't cook, and he's horrible about shopping even. So it was very stressful. I even talk about it in the book but it was a beautiful experience because he took care of me for 4 months before we got to change roles. So, I don't know. That's one of my personal challenges because, as I said at the beginning, I'm somebody who doesn't sit still well. Like, really, I have to be up dancing or walking or moving around.
So going to a conference is hard.
I had to sit still for all these months, but actually I used my energy tools, my EFT tapping, and I used Donna Eden's 5-minute energy routine, and I did boxing just with my upper body, and some hand weights. And I managed to get through those months without any emotional decline. I actually was very good, and I switched to all online stuff. I didn't go to any meetings, only went to the doctor, and that was about it. But that was a big challenge for me. Physical limitations are a huge, huge challenge. Other challenges, business challenges? I don't know, money. Yeah.
So you've got a passion and you volunteer. Let's talk about that.
Okay. So I truly believe that I guess everybody needs a dog. Unconditional love comes in these little furry packages. And yes, they die before we die usually, but I've had several dogs. So right when my husband finally got better, we lost a dog. And this dog was a therapy dog that worked with me just with my clients, but I never got her certified as a therapy dog. So a few months later, after grieving that other dog, I said, I want a dog that's about 33 pounds that will be perfect for a therapy dog, and I don't know where I'm getting her. But I had this notion of the size, and it needed to be kind of fluffy. So anyway, we got a little border collie. She was rescued. We don't know where she really started or even how old she is. She's probably about 2, and her name is Serena. And as soon as I took her to training, border collies are just so smart. She went to the head of her class immediately. She passed in 6 weeks, the Canine Good Citizen, and she passed the first week in therapy dog evaluation. So we didn't even really have to, the first visit to the nursing home, she would have passed, except the lady didn't have the papers to fill out. And so we've been visiting nursing homes and Alzheimer's care facilities at least once a week since it's been about 6 months now. And she is just incredible. And we brighten the day for the patients, but I think it also brightens the day for the staff because they really enjoy seeing a little animal coming through. And Serena loves the people.
So what does she do?
So she likes to be petted, and she will come up to a resident and she will sit right where they can touch her, and then they touch her fur, and the first thing they say is, she's so soft. And then they usually ask me how old she is. And even if we visit every week, they always say the same thing. Because I don't know if she has a business card now, because I try to help them remember her name.
A business card, that's cute.
My business card is on the other side, but it's fun. And she travels well. She travels anywhere we need to go, which is another cool thing. So I'm hoping, my husband and I want to serve communities of heart health, brain health, in healthcare in general, because the people in healthcare are really overworked. We want to bring some smiles to those people and also to share emotional freedom techniques with them. So Serena she's very good little manners. She comes right in and sits, and she doesn't bark. She doesn't jump. But she's very present. She's always looking at you.
Yeah. So you work with people with brain deficiencies as well as their caretakers?
Well, this is visiting. So I'm not doing any therapeutic work with them. But what I am talking with the facilities about is having me back to do emotional freedom techniques training with the staff, because it's a very good stress management technique for them. And they can possibly use it with the residents. I think it's better that the staff there uses it with the residents than me, because each person is going to be unique, and the staff knows them better. I can't quite get to know all the residents that well, So
How do you deal with work-life balance? I
For
mean,
myself,
you say you're very energetic and you're very kind of keyed up all the time. You like to move. What do
yeah,
you do for yourself?
for myself. So I'm a gardener. I have an herb garden. I love to travel. So I always have a trip planned of some sort that's for fun. Sometimes I combine work and fun together. I do jazzercise almost every day. I sleep like a rock. I think that's one of my gifts, my personal gifts. I like to sleep, and I'm very regular in my schedule. So I try to, get to bed by 9:30 or 10, and I'm usually up by 6, sometimes earlier. And I think that's important. And I've cut back on sugar. I have to say, sugar can do some weird things to your body. And if you can get it mostly out of your system, I think I would recommend that to most people. Haven't gone vegan yet, but people are really pushing that on me. I don't know. I don't know if that's for me. I really like all kinds of food, so we'll see.
So, what are some of your favorite places you've been to? I get asked that a lot. What about you?
Sedona, Arizona.
Really?
Oh, yes. I've done some trainings there. It's a nice place to do trainings.
The
And
vortex.
oh, yeah. And the hiking. And it's just gorgeous. And just the colors and the way the sun comes in on those rocks. That's a good place to go. I love Italy. So I could go there. Greece was pretty good. I've done a trip to Greece.
What's your favorite place in Italy?
Um, Let me think. Sorrento was pretty nice, and the Amalfi Coast was beautiful. And then we spent a week in Sicily, which was amazing. Taormina, yummy. That's a good place. Um, yeah, so that. And then we did a Viking cruise of the Rhine right after we did the 1 year anniversary of George's debacle, whatever we want to call that, or catastrophe. And so we did the Rhine cruise, and that, even if you don't like cruising on cruise ships, the Rhine Viking is different because they're very small ships, small number of people. You're never in a line. It's a beautiful experience. So I think we're going to do another one of those. And we have a special place in Florida that we always go, and I wrote about it in the book. It's called Port Tehiver in Melbourne Beach, Florida, about an hour from Orlando. And it's the most wonderful B&B with just wholesome Midwest people running it. But it's very elegant right on the beach.
How did your early life affect who you are? Do you feel you've lived out what you needed from your early life?
I see more and more how my early life set me up to do exactly what I'm doing right now. My father's a very analytical accountant turned financial portfolio advisor, money genius. And my mother was a first grade teacher, a librarian, a gardener, the kind of person that believes in fairies and talks about it. And, read to me. We were always having projects and gardens. And so she's very visual and artsy, and my dad's very logical and practical. And guess what I am? Both. So this idea of balance in my world is just natural. And it all exists within me, whereas some people have more of one than the other. And I think since I've been doing this work with the invisible energy, think about things that you can't see. That's what I work with. And it's fascinating and real, but it is on that right brain side.
Your mother's side.
My mother's side, yeah. But I think that's where the spiritual side of us is. And so it is not to be neglected. And maybe that's part of the reason I'm here, is to help people wake up to who we really are. And that's where our passions lie, too. I'm quite certain when you feel something in your heart, it's coming from there.
So, what do you think is one of your best moments of your life?
Oh, they're little moments. I've spent a lot of time with a Canadian elder named Gashida. I speak about her in my book. One of my best moments was finally going to her retreat center in northern Canada, to this lake that has barely been touched by man. And the water there is just so pure and beautiful and clean. And to jump into that lake and to submerge and come out of it, just, don't know, it's like a baptism of some sort into what the world could be, and drinking the water from that well all week and being around loons and the sound of that was yummy. And I got to teach her people up there emotional freedom techniques, and she had never brought another speaker in before. It was fabulous to be able to like have that yummy experience and then go do my work too, and then hang out with a very wise woman who is so connected to the earth, and to walk the land with her for a few days. So that's one yummy experience. But, just being in my garden and seeing a hummingbird, or walking with my little dog and seeing how well she behaves, or seeing her, it's the little moments that are most magical. And I'm pleased that I've figured out how to catch those. Everybody, that could be a talent worth pursuing.
What are some of your fears for the future?
The things that get me caught up are the possibility of losing my husband, because his health problems, he's working to get things better, but we still don't know for sure what's going on with his heart. So I get nervous when we don't have self-service when we're out hiking. Those things happen. I got to be okay with that. So I face it. And getting older and maybe having limitations. So I'm just more careful about how I take care of myself. I don't jump so high anymore.
What would you like to leave our listeners with?
I think my message to everybody would be check in with your heart, because your heart helps your brain run. Check in with your heart about what really matters to you, and take time every day to find little things that your heart notices, that your brain notices, that your brain and your heart work together. Notice how your body responds to life experiences. And especially if you've got pain or something that's keeping you awake at night, don't ignore that. Look me up. Learn about emotional freedom techniques. And, I've got videos on my website. I've got resources for you. And we could have a talk too.
That sounds wonderful. And I think everybody could use something like that, whether it's emotion or, as you say, maybe physical pain that they're going through.
Yeah.
Or even kind of maybe revisiting something painful in the past.
And sometimes our pain comes from worrying about another person, a child, an adult child who's struggling with anxiety or depression. I want everybody to know there's a whole lot of hope, and there's clinical data behind what I'm talking about here. There's over 100 studies, functional MRI studies of the brain using this technique. So Wikipedia still doesn't have all the data in it yet, so don't go to Wikipedia to learn about this. But I can direct them to clinical data, very encouraging about the power of our own body to correct and heal.
And let's talk about one more thing. It seems like one of the things that a lot of teenagers are facing today is the thought of suicide. So how can this help them?
Okay, the thought of suicide is being in that place where you don't accept your feelings, you don't love yourself, you don't think you're lovable. Actually, suicide is a state of total isolation and so much pain. I think anybody who's even going into some depression, I want them to recognize that they isolate, because trauma is isolation. Isolation is trauma. And so to connect with someone else, and all of us who aren't going through that need to be carefully watching for those who isolate.
And by isolate, do you mean like a teenage son that goes directly into his room and stays there, for instance?
Yeah, and maybe isolates with a video game, but isn't interacting with other people. And sometimes people will, they're normally calling you or texting you, and suddenly they're not. There's nothing. They're not posting on social media. They're not doing anything. That's isolating too. So we need to be watching and mindful of that. And I think we have to be a little more persistent about helping those people connect with resources. It's hard. And then there's this drug opioid crisis going on. And the therapists are overworked. It's very hard to get people into therapy, even when we see they've got a problem. But I think better safe than sorry. If you even suspect somebody has this problem, you get them to an emergency room, because sometimes that's the only way to get them into treatment. As hard as that seems, that gets them.
And you're
into the
talking
system.
about the opioid?
Anybody. I mean, somebody who you suspect is suicidal or deeply depressed. The ER is the place to take them, unfortunately.
Well, thank you for all your advice and your thoughts. It's just been wonderful.
Well, thank you so much, Rose. My pleasure. I'm so
I
glad I
hope
met
you
you.
enjoyed listening to another story of the impact of trailblazers. Visit our website at trailblazersimpact.com and connect with us at hello@trailblazersimpact.com. And remember, you must learn a new way to think before you can master a new way to be.